Good morning. It is 9 o'clock. We're here for our regular scheduled commissioners meeting, Tuesday, June 13th. We have a full slate of commissioners. We have our administrator and the clerk of the board. And at this time, I'll call the meeting to order, and if everybody would please rise and join in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda is approval of vouchers. I believe we have two of them.
Yes. Move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $1,584,365.07 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $1,173,411.68 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Moves us down to the consent agenda. I believe there are 5 items on the consent agenda.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 5 as presented.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of questions on some of these, and defer to the board as to whether or not you want to deal with these separately or just take a couple of administrative questions.
Commissioner Mullen?
I'm fine doing them separately or however you like to present them.
Well, let me raise what the question is. This is on consent item number 2, which is a contract between Juvenile Justice and Adams County, which, by the way, I think is a great agreement. And I see it's had a fair amount of review. Several years ago, Benton and Franklin counties, when we were short on civil legal staff, had an agreement whereby if it was a joint program between the two counties, either county's civil attorney could sign off as to form, because form is a legal requirement, and they aren't signing off as to content. And that was allowing us to essentially reduce the workload for these reviews in half. Now, I don't honestly recall if that was ever codified in a resolution, but that was the practice for a number of years. I noticed that this one, if I'm remembering right, and I don't have it in front of me, I could pull it up, has a signature block for Jen Johnson, who no longer works here, but more importantly, there's no Franklin County sign-off that I recall. And I don't personally think that we need to have one, but it does raise the question of what is the preference and the will of the board with respect to legal reviews on these contracts, since recently the board told the county prosecutor that we wanted legal review on everything. So in this package, it is page 13, and it is signed by Mr. Hallstrom, and I'm satisfied with that, but there's an open question as to whether or not the board wants a county civil legal sign-off or not.
So are you wanting to pull item 2 for separate discussion, or because we don't have a second on the motion yet?
Whatever the will of the board is, I think the question is if the board is comfortable with this practice of just having one county sign off, then we can leave it in the consent. If we think that that's a concern, then we probably should pull it for separate discussion.
So you're wanting to pull item 2 for separate discussion?
No. What I'm saying is it's a board decision, and if the board is comfortable with it as is, and I am, then we can move forward. But because this board has made it clear to the PA's office that they want legal reviews on everything, This doesn't appear to have it. And so out of respect for the board's direction several weeks ago, I thought it necessary and important to raise it.
The chair-
I'm fine with it like it is, so it's up to the board.
The chair recognizes Karen, the clerk of the board, Karen Milham.
So I just wanted to let you know, in the past, I don't know exactly if it's 6 months or a year, on by-county items, the prosecuting or Benton County would sign it for a certain amount of time, and then they would, both of them had an agreement that one of the counties signed it, it was good to go for our county. I don't know if you want to change that in the future, but that is traditionally how it has happened.
And, Mr. Chairman, I concur. That's how I recall it as well.
Okay.
What has changed is that this board gave explicit direction to the prosecutor's office that they want a Franklin County legal review and sign off on everything. So I'm okay either way. I just...
Commissioner Mullen?
I've already made the motion to approve it, so unless there's an objection to it, I would say we continue.
Okay, and I'm fine with that.
I'm
Thank you.
waiting for a second.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 5. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. If you could pass that first packet down with the pink note on the top, get it signed because the gentleman is waiting for that. That moves us down to public comment. Is there anybody in the room for public comment?
George Dockstetter. I've got some questions on the assessed values that have come out of the assessor's office. It seems to me that the appraisers don't know what the hell they're doing. I've been in the real estate business going on 50 years, and I've worked with lenders and appraisers, and they use comparable sales. And I've got an example. My daughter's house is assessed at $491,000. And the two latest sales, based on square footage, averaged out, come to $185 a foot, which brings her value to $406,260. So there's a basically $85,000 difference, which is over 20% above market value. And so I am filling out the paperwork to protest the value. And the first thing it says on the handout from the assessor's office is visit or call the county assessor's office, blah, 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 location, phone number, and review your appraisal and verify the square footage, number of bedrooms, type of heat are correct. You may ask the appraiser to review the sales price of similar properties. You may ask the appraiser to visit your property in person. If an error has been made, the appraiser may make a change in value. So I met with an appraiser downstairs yesterday, showed him the two houses that were comparable, and one is basically 500 square foot bigger, and the other one is 100 and some square foot bigger, and the appraiser basically said, so what? Take it to the Board of Equalization or wherever I go next. And personally, any appraiser going to the bank is going to use everything in the last 6 months and go to the bank, and the bank's going to loan based on that value. And if they think it's out of whack, you're not going to get a loan. If an appraiser took those values into the bank and said, this is what it's worth, they're going to get fired. And our illustrious assessor keeps telling us prices are up 20% across the board. According to the National or Tri-City Association of Realtors, which I'm part of, the statistics for this year, for the first 5 months, the prices are down anywhere between 3% and 8% a month, year over year. And everybody out there, according to the assessor, is up 20%. So I've got another question that I think they need to send them out for a little bit of education on doing home appraisals. And the other question that came up at the poker deal the other night after we all had a few drinks is there nepotism going on in the assessor's office? Are we getting whacked and the elected officials and department heads getting a break? So what I would like to see, and my poker playing buddies would like to see, is a comparison of every elected official and department head, what the value of their house is, and what the 3 neighbors on each side of them, who went up what. Because we're just wondering if you guys are getting a break and we're having to carry the load. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
Good morning. I'm Chris Hollingsworth. I'm a certified residential appraiser and a Franklin County resident. My comments are a little long, so I've broken up in 2 parts if you want me to break them up, or I can combine them if you'll give me a little extra time. In the past week, I've been contacted by numerous Franklin County residents. They are beside themselves due to the recent assessment of their properties. As you may recall, I spoke last week offering appraisal consulting to the assessor's office free of charge. Shortly after I spoke, I met up with the assessor in the hallway. Mr. Rosenau appeared to be excited about the offer and wanted to meet later to discuss it further. He also told me he wanted to have his chief appraiser contact me to discuss the offer as well. I spoke with Ms. Morgan, the chief appraiser, about appraisal consulting from not just myself, but other appraiser peers who also agreed to volunteer their time to help explain the appraisal process from the fee side of appraisal. The offer was pushed back fiercely by Ms. Morgan. When I received the pushback, I started asking her basic appraisal questions that any appraiser should know. She scoffed at the questions and tried talking down to me. As you recall, Mr. Rosenau came into this office after the previous assessor quit abruptly. I don't know the exact details as to why the assessor quit, but what I've been told by those that are in the know is that there were a lot of angry residents a few years ago, and the pushback was too much for him. It does not appear that the root issue of these poor assessments have been addressed. I was one of those residents that had to push back on the chief appraiser's method of calculating in the land tables. Luckily, at that time, the assessor was a certified appraiser and knew that Ms. Morgan did what she did was wrong and fixed my assessment, although he chose not to adjust all the other homes impacted by the erroneous land tables. This issue with the leadership under the current assessor still appears to be a problem that must be resolved, or we will continue to have unsubstantiated assessed values. As appraisers, even those that are acting as appraisers by the Department of Revenue, we are bound by USPAP. USPAP is the Universal Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. The stated purpose of USPAP is to promote or protect and to promote public trust in the appraisal profession. I think it's safe to say by the overwhelming pushback by the constituents of Franklin County, the assessor's office has failed to meet the main purpose of USPAP. The Department of Revenue states that the assessed values must be 100% of market value. The definition of market value is the most probable price which a property should bring in a competitive and open market under all conditions requisite to a fair sale. Additionally, the total assessed value is broken up into 2 categories, land and improvements. When I spoke with the chief appraiser, I asked her what all is included in land values, and Ms. Morgan informed me that only the dirt was included and that all improvements to the land, including utilities, wells, septic systems, etc., are included in the improvements. Being that the state breaks the 2 categories apart and does not allow for a single figure, one can only assume that that is because both the land and the improvements must be accurate. The values assessed by the assessor's office in 2023 are from properties that sold in 2022. In my normal course of business, I found that the vast majority of sales that I have researched that closed in 2022 are now assessed higher than their market value sales price. I had a Franklin County resident contact me about a home that sold in October of 2022 for $677,000 and is now assessed for $961,000. This transfer was an arm's length transaction and sold for market value. Again, the requirement by the Department of Revenue is to assess properties at market value. The arm's length transaction in 2022 is the market value of that property. Another resident backs up to Chiawana Park, but is being assessed as river frontage, while homes a few parcels away that back up to the same park are not. I found one parcel that has a riverfront with over 5,200 square feet of home, a pool, a 3-car garage, and has a land assessment over $951,000 and an improvement assessment of just $153,000. I'm no contractor, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to even get the lumber package for a home that size for $153,000. Just yesterday, I had a Franklin County resident contact me over his assessment. He has a 2,240 square foot Olin home north of Pasco. Those familiar with real estate know that Olin Homes is an entry-level builder and not one you would typically compare to a custom home builder. You could compare their homes to Hayden Homes, Ahu Construction, or even Monogram Homes. He does have a shop and an in-ground pool. However, the improvements have been assessed over $922,000. Just the improvements, not his total, $922,000. Everyone that I've spoken with clearly has had very positive things to say about Mr. Rosenau. I have no idea to believe otherwise. I'm not saying that there is anything nefarious going on in the assessor's office. However, I also don't know what I would do differently if I were trying to tank the assessor. I also find it interesting that the chief appraiser, typically the second in line under the assessor, moved to Franklin County last year. As you all know, the assessor must be a resident of the county they're elected to.
Chris, just not to interrupt you, but we do have a 3-minute and we have 2 comment periods. And
Okay.
you could finish on the next comment.
No problem.
I've been railed pretty hard about letting people go over it.
No problem.
That's all great information, by the way.
All right, yeah.
But we have another comment period. You got 3 more minutes then. Is there anybody else for public comment?
Can we stop for a minute?
Yes.
We need to,
Restart? Something happened?